We defer, especially with juveniles, to the state rules, and we honor those, and we hope to change those.
My question, though, is about the signal that stance sends to everyone listening to this press conference. Can you take action and push the envelope there?
We have arrested juveniles federally when they commit crimes, not just with a firearm, not just a firearm alone, in possession with that. It's certainly something we've looked at in the past, and it's something we can do. And it's not out of the realm.
That was St. Louis Police Chief Robert Tracy, still somewhat new on the job, calling for Missouri lawmakers to mirror federal law that outlaws minors from carrying guns or bullets without adult supervision. But if that's already federal law, then how are kids getting away with it? U.S. Attorney Sayler Fleming joins us now from the Eastern District of Missouri. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Your office has a lot on its plate, from
It does.
prosecuting white-collar crime, corruption, drug charges, human trafficking, yes, gun smuggling across state lines. Do you have the bandwidth or even the legal grounds to accept criminal charges and prosecute firearm cases from local police?
So let me start by saying this, that violent crime, addressing violent crime here in the Eastern District of Missouri, but especially in the St. Louis region, has been and will continue to be one of our top priorities. We have routinely prosecuted firearms cases both from the St. Louis City Police Department and the St. Louis County Police Department. In fact, I would say that that's the bulk of the cases, the type of cases that we prosecuted here locally.
For mere possession, or if someone uses that firearm in the commission of a violent crime?
Both. So we charge a bulk of felon in possession cases. We also charge a variety, quite a few actually, of carjacking cases, Hobbs Act robberies. Those are really commercial robberies, as well as drug-related murders. In fact, we prosecute more murder cases in the vast majority of districts in the country.
You've no doubt seen the trend. I don't know if some might tell you, some criminologists might tell you it peaked during or after COVID, but the trend of juveniles becoming more involved with violent crime, more involved in carjackings, and we've seen evidence of that in St. Louis. If a teen is caught carrying an illegal gun, and by just possessing it, they're violating federal law. And I can tell you there are dozens of teens carrying illegal guns around the streets of St. Louis in the last few weeks alone. What happens then if local police catch them, find the evidence on their person, refer that case to you? Can you prosecute it?
Well, the technical answer is yes. And to back up a little bit, our office does in fact prosecute juveniles federally, but we only do so in very egregious circumstances. Historically, what you would see is that we prosecute juveniles who have committed fatal carjackings. In other words, someone has been shot or killed during the course of a carjacking. When it comes to just the mere possession, while that is unlawful under federal law, it is very complicated under the federal system to prosecute that juvenile federally. There are two different mechanisms by which we can prosecute juveniles, and it's very complicated, but to give you a shorter version of that, we can either proceed against a juvenile under the Juvenile Delinquency Act as a juvenile, or we can seek transfer. In other words, very similar to the certification process in the state court system. In other words, we would ask the district court to certify this juvenile as an adult, and then we would proceed against that juvenile as an adult, just like any other defendant.
And you might not get that certification for 6, 9, 12 months, or...
Oh, it can take upwards of a year or more.
And in the interim, the juvenile is where? On probation, at home?
Well, it depends. So if they have committed a violent crime, or what federal law defines as a violent crime, we would seek detention. That's very problematic in and of itself. First, there are no federal juvenile facilities.
So where do you put them?
Right. That's a million-dollar question. So we have to put them in a contract facility. Oftentimes, those facilities are not even located in the state of Missouri. That's a problem. Not only, it's not the best thing for the juvenile's family, his or her counsel, and we as prosecutors in the court don't want that either.
I want to ask you, though, about a different policy question, because Missouri Governor Mike Parson just recently signed in the last few years the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Right now, a court has sort of stayed the implementation of that law pending further legal review, but I wonder, in a more practical sense, have you or prosecutors in your office seen any impact there? Has it made your jobs harder in some sense?
Yes, we have, and I would refer you, obviously the Department of Justice did file suit, and just to back up a little bit, the penalty mechanism for that is against any state or local law enforcement officers who enforce federal gun legislation. So someone can bring suit against them if they were to work with, collaborate, provide resources to the federal government enforcing gun laws in any way. And yes, we have seen, and that's fleshed out a little bit in the lawsuit, we have seen an impact because of that.
Are there any specific examples? Like, take for example this case we saw this last week. Should a police officer have encountered, or if some officer had encountered teens carrying these weapons that we've now seen in the images and tried to engage, maybe tried to even refer that case to you, would that have crossed the tripwire of...
It could have. It depends on, there are a variety of different interpretations of the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Thankfully, I would say locally, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department as well as the St. Louis County Police Department have continued to refer firearms cases to us, as well as crimes of violence involving firearms.
And so just to put a finer point on that, you've seen the impact in a reduced number of cases referred or less cooperation with local law enforcement? What are some examples?
I think some of the impact that we have seen has been in more of our rural areas, police departments that, maybe smaller police departments that are worried about the ramifications of working with us. I know that ATF, as that we said in the lawsuit, has had difficulty with some police departments entering gun information, trace reports, things like that, information into their systems, which makes it very difficult for us to do our jobs.
What should the message be from the Department of Justice, your office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, to any teens, young adults, people who are committing crimes of violence in St. Louis? What is your message to them?
So I want to say that I think the public doesn't fully understand what our office does when it comes to juveniles, and that is in large part because the statute requires that those proceedings and the related court records be under seal. But what I would say is that we do accept referrals from all police departments, but especially here in the city of St. Louis and in the county. And in those egregious situations, if we have a juvenile that has committed, like I said, a crime of violence, as defined under federal law, we will review that case and potentially prosecute it. And you will be prosecuted as an adult in that instance.
Is it fair to say your office has more tools to prosecute organized crime than local police have?
I think that, I don't know if we have more tools. I think that we work very, very closely. It's necessary that we work very closely with the local police departments. They are the ones that are on the street every day. They are the ones with the information and know who the players are in that organized crime.
And without giving specific details or compromising any investigations, of course, all those little disclaimers that go along with it, what is the extent to which juveniles might be acting at the behest of some larger organized crime or gang? We know that there are recruitment efforts that are seeping younger and younger. Is there a pathway for the feds to get at that, where if a juvenile is committing an act of violence on behalf of someone else, what can you do?
Absolutely, and I would say that in recent years we have seen at least a slight rise in adults using juveniles to commit violent crimes with the mistaken impression that they would somehow be insulating themselves from prosecution. But I can assure you that if we are able to prove that, we will prosecute those adults. And we actually have, there are mechanisms under federal law where we can seek enhanced penalties for situations in which adults are using juveniles to commit crimes.
All right, bringing some clarity to a confusing and complicated subject matter, U.S. Attorney Sayler Fleming, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.